Hello and welcome to a video on fitting a sound decoder and keep alive into a Graham Farish Class 31. In this video we're going to be fitting an ESU LokSound Micro Next 18 decoder, but the principle should work if you're also using a Zmo MS591 or a MS581 decoder. The keep alive unit will be one from Zmo STACO series. We're going for the 3A because it uses the small diameter but slightly longer capacitors. Each one of these is rated at 2.7 volts and they have to be wired in series to give you basically 5.4. You've also got this control circuit board here, and what this does, it drops the voltage down from the decoder to a voltage level that is safe for these capacitors to charge them up, and then when power is needed to drive the decoder, it steps the power back up again. What it also does is it controls when the current or when the capacitors are charged to prevent a sudden current in rush when you first power on. So it can, with some of these decoders, it can take 10, possibly 60 seconds for them to get fully charged up. So first things first, we're going to take the body off and take a look inside and see what space we've actually got. It should be relatively straightforward, and the two parts should pull up, two bits should pull apart. So what we've got here is the decoder blanking plate, which we can take off. And what these switches here are for turning lights off at each end. Obviously with DCC you don't need to worry about that because that is all done with the decoder itself. So offering the bits up, you can see you've got a bit of space there, but not a lot between the end of the decoder and the set of switches. As you can see, there isn't a lot of space. We can't fit a pair of these in sensibly, let alone the charging circuit. So what we're going to have to do is remove this switch. We should be able to desolder that, and what we'll do is we'll then just simply bridge the two parts of the two contacts on each one, so effectively the switch is permanently on. So with the Zmo stack unit, we're using the STACO3a out of the series. This one uses a couple of very thin but slightly longer 2.7 volt capacitors, which have a high capacitance rating to them. These will need to be wired up in series to give us a track voltage, a voltage of around about 5.4 volts. This is the control circuit and charging circuit. This does a couple of things. First off, it drops the voltage down from the decoder to 5.4 volts to make it safe for the capacitors so they don't get blown up. In reverse, it steps the voltage up, back up to the decoder so it can drive the loco. And what it also does is it controls the sudden current inrush. So rather than them getting power instantly, it gradually ramps up how much power it gets over a period of time. So in some instances it can take anything from 10 seconds to get a very simple amount of current into the capacitors, all the way up to about 40 or 50 seconds to get them fully charged. What it also does, it helps with programming as well. So by delaying how quick they get charged up means that you don't lose current while doing programming. So what we need to do is take a look in the loco. So we'll take the body off, which is fairly straightforward and pulling apart. And what we'll see here is this our blanking plate. These switches control the lighting functions at each end. As we're using DCC, these effectively become redundant because all that control is done using the decoder. Now, taking the blanking plate off, we can see what space is left available for our keep alives. As you can see, there isn't a lot. So if we take a look at offer up one of the capacitors, you've got enough, possibly just about widthways, but to be fair, once you've got the body on, that actually will be fouling. So really we want them down the middle, and we should hopefully have enough space to fit the control circuit in there as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove this switch unit. We're going to bridge the two solder points straight over with a piece of wire, as obviously the decoder will then handle the charging of that, not the charging, will handle the control of the lights at each end. So what we're going to do to remove the switch is we're going to use a desolder pump and our soldering iron, and we will heat up the tabs coming from the switch and use a gun just to get rid of the solder, or certainly get rid of the worst of it. Do the same with this side. And if you're lucky, that will come away. So that side's come. Off. I just do a bit more hit that side. And away we are, nice and clean. What you should see now, if we put the decoder back in, is we now have ample space for our two capacitors to fit in. Now what we're going to do is we will simply bridge that contact to that contact and that one to that one. We'll use that just a spare piece of wire off these two capacitors. So say with these capacitors from the Zmo Keep Alives, we have to wire these in series. So what this means is we have to go from the shortest, the negative on one capacitor to the positive on the other. The negative always on the capacitor is denoted by this dash with the grey and a negative sign in, and also it has a shorter leg, so the longer leg is for the positive, shorter leg is negative. These is to wire these in series. We'll just simply bend one negative leg that way, on the other one we'll bend the positive leg that, and that will give us allow us to do that. Before we solder them together, we will just give them a quick trim, because we don't obviously need that amount of excess lead. That's that one. That's the other. And that's our two done in series. And then the couple of bits that we cut off, I'm simply going to use them to bridge our gap here. So so what I'm going to do is simply tin the ends place that in there. a quick dab of heat in there on that end. And the same there. I'll do the same for the other end. There we go, quick in, quick out, and away we are. So that then provides us with space there for the capacitors. Also, what we'll probably do later on is we will put a bit of capstan tape over that to prevent them shorting out against anything else. Right, so I've had a bit of a play around. We're trying to work out where the best place to fit the charging circuit is. With a bit of, covering it in a bit of capstan tape, I've discovered that actually it will fit in here, just about balanced, on top of the decoder, upside down like that, and you put the body back on. You'll see that there's no gaps between the valence, which has fixed the the chassis and the body there, same there. And we turn it over. We've got no gap between the two, so we're quite happy that will fit within the space available. So I'll remove that. What we now need to do is wire the capacitors into the charging circuit. So obviously on the charging circuit we have our white and black is our ground, our white and blue is our positive common. So I roughly cut the wires to length based upon I knew the long length they supply you with is going to be way too big, so we'll cut them down to roughly there. Very carefully bare the ends, give it a bit of a twist. And then tin them both. And then on these we will just cut them down as well. And what we have here is some fine heat shrink that will quite happily cover our joints and protect the wires from shorting out. So I'll cut them off to length. Yeah, so what we're going to do is solder the wires onto the capacitors. So we'll pop them in a close peg, makes things nice and easy to get a grip of. On the control board we've got a pair of wires. The white black is our ground, our white blue is our positive common, and obviously on the capacitor here we've got our stripe on the case that indicates our negative, and we'll solder that onto first. Obviously I've pre-tinned the wires and pre-tinned the remaining legs on the capacitors, so all we've got to do is just simply touch the soldering iron on, and that's that taken. And we do the same for the other end. That should be taken nice and simple. Then on goes the heat shrink. So that's we'll just use the end of the soldering iron to shrink those down. And what that does not only protects us against unnecessary potential short circuiting, but it also adds a little layer of physical support to the wires and the joint. At the other end of the board is where the wires to the decoder go. So same format as what's at the other end, so we'll have a ground at the top, positive at the bottom. What we'll do is we'll just stick that on a piece of wood there, which is a bit of double-sided tape, and we will tin those pads as well again. And again with our wire, again we strip a tiny bit back, and we'll just pre-tin those. And very quickly touch the soldering iron on. Don't need that much solder on it. Do that one. Oops. And the same to do the other. Voila. Right, so I haven't got the wires soldered on the control circuit to go off to the decoder. We now need to solder them onto the decoder itself. So with the ESU decoder, with the Nano, we're following this diagram here, and what we're looking at is, if we ignore this big plate here, which is the Next 18 socket that ESU provide, there's 3 solder tabs along the bottom here on the actual physical decoder itself. We've got positive, we've got aux7, and we've got the ground, and that is what relates to on our decoder here. So 3 very smallish solder pads on the side of the decoder, and we're going to use the outer 2. So the one in the corner is our ground, and the one next to the components is our positive. Again, we're going to pre-tin these and then just simply dab the pre-tinned wires straight onto those. So in and out pretty quick. And obviously with our charging circuit being fairly close to the decoder, we don't actually need much in the way of length of wire. The wire length we use is probably more there for practicality of soldering, and as more so than anything else. So I think we've done that way round. So cut the wires off there. Now if we're using the Zmo MS591, the solder pads aren't presented on the decoder for the ground or the positive common. In this instance we then have to find them on the circuit board of the Loco. Fortunately, if you take the circuit board off, Graham Farish have actually marked up the ground. What they haven't done is marked up the positive common, but it's not too difficult to work out if you know where what pins on the Next 18 socket they need to be connected to. You can sort of trace them back. Using the MS591, you don't actually need the control board at all. Yeah, the 591 will allow you to solder a pair of capacitors like these straight to the board, but obviously that decoder is a little bit longer than the ESU and almost double the length of the 581. Oh, sorry, the 591. Yeah, so what I can do is place it all in. Our circuit board went up there, capacitors in there. I just put the body back on the right way around. How do you know which way is the front of a diesel loco? Well, obviously with a steam loco it's fairly obvious. With a diesel, I was always told by a railwayman that the number one end, and thus the forward end, is the end with the fan on. So in this case, this end is number one, thus forward. This is the non-fan end is number two. The other thing with obviously the Farish loco and the body is because everything's quite tight, they've got cutouts or indentations for where the glazing would go on the windows. So you can't actually get it. You can put it on the wrong way around, but the body won't go on, sit back on properly anyway. So we'll just pop that on there, make sure everything fits back on, which it does quite nicely, and everything it fits, and then we will cover the control board back up with a bit of Captain tape just to insulate it and protect it. And then that is basically it. There is a couple of settings on the ESU decoder. There's certainly one with using this style of keep alive, which is CV113. And what that does, that controls the amount of the maximum duration that the power pack will provide power to the decoder for, or how long the decoder will take power from it. Because obviously you don't want the thing running on for it. Because obviously you don't want the thing running on and off the track at the end of if it loses power. It's one thing getting over a brief interruption or over a dead frog or whatever, but if for some reason you have a short circuit or it comes off the end of the rail, you don't want it plummeting down to the floor. So CV113 controls the maximum amount of time that the decoder will take power from the keep alive for without seeing track power, and that can go up to about 8 seconds with the LokSound V5s. But obviously that is very much dependent upon how much power is in the capacitor and the current draw of the motor and everything else. But sensibly, if that value is kept down to about 2 seconds, that should be more than sufficient for most applications. And to be honest, if you need more than 2 seconds worth of power, there's something you seriously need to look at getting sorted on the loco or your track work. So the decoder all fitted, we're now apply power to the loco. Using this Concepts alpha meter, you can see what the track voltage is and also the amperage going through. At the moment it's peaked at basically 50 milliamps as the capacitor charge up, and that's dropped down a little bit once it's fully charged. So now if I just turn the track power off with the loco stationary, That's roughly how long of power you're getting from the Keep Alive. And we'll let it charge back up again. Set it off in motion, roughly speed step 10, slow speed, and then we'll turn it off. And you get roughly half a bogey length at step 10. How far you get will vary depending upon how fast the loco's going and what sort of current it's, or what sort of a train it's pulling behind it. But for a loco like a Class 31, that should be more than sufficient. Because really you just want to get over any niggles and brief interruptions.